Welcome to the ACC Panic Room. Filling in for Lauren Brownlow is Candace Cooper, Locked On ACC Podcast. I'm Joe Ovies. Talking season is about to wrap up, Candace. Like going all the way back to ACC kickoff, we got the coaches poll and the AP preseason top 25 poll. The expectations have been properly set. I think we got to focus on the Wolfpack, don't we?
I think we should pour one out for talking season. It's been a time, but now we're ready to get things rolling. No more talk. Now it's time to deliver. So I'm ready for NC State to potentially do that.
You know, it's funny. The Wolfpack under Dave Doran experienced that thing that every kind of middle tier top 25 team going into the season has this for like a week in the summer. It's like dark horse talk, right? Like North Carolina experiences that every so often. I think NC State experienced that back in like 2017, 2018, where SEC analyst Cole Kubelik said that they're a dark horse for the college football playoff. With the Wolfpack, it's interesting because it's like a 2-year carryover. And there's, you got the pandemic season, you've got the super seniors, you got everybody, quote unquote, running it back, which we typically associate with a basketball squad, not a football squad. So it's kind of interesting to see State get some like legitimate hype earlier in the year. But once kickoff came around, what happened? We all just kind of like fell back to the default of Clemson, which makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was even funnier when the preseason polls came out and Clemson was like the outright favorite by a mile. It seemed to be very confusing about all the hype around NC State because I'm like, I thought we were all in this together, that we're thinking this is NC State's year, and it clearly wasn't that.
Well, but I think, honestly, when it's all said and done, I think State is where they're supposed to be, right? And Clemson's going to get the benefit of the doubt. You don't think so? Where do you think they should be?
Well,
you think it should be a little higher, a little top 10?
You made the great point of running it back. If you say you have 17 stars, you have 10 coaches who said they're not going to leave somewhere because they're very committed to the year, and you know how bad they wanted that lick back from not having the Holiday Bowl. Why are you not bought into the system? Because Doran, I mean, when he wins big, but then I guess there are those head scratchers that make you say, all right, we're still focused. Because last year, Clemson was able to pull out some wins to where you were like, okay, it's still Clemson, right? The Georgia Tech win, Clemson, that was like, right, the weather issue, and then you have Boston College coming up close. There were definitely times where you're like, all right, Clemson can absolutely be taken down, and they were in some aspects, but for a lot of ways, when they said this is an off year, they still were able to pull out 10 wins.
NC State's season is going to hinge on a couple of things. Their schedule is favorable, but also not at the same time. Like you'd love to be playing Clemson at home again, where they had the breakthrough last year. So going to Clemson with revenge on Clemson's mind is going to be difficult. You also have a stretch there at the end of the season with Louisville and then Carolina on the road, which can prove to be tricky because we don't know where Carolina's going to be. We don't know how the quarterback situation is going to shake out with the Tar Heels, which we'll get to in a second. So the schedule ultimately is favorable. So to me, State season comes down to two things. The first one is health, right? You look at what's happened at Wake Forest. You look at what's happened at North Carolina. You look at what happened at Clemson. State, who's had the injury bug before. They had a lost season a couple of years ago that kind of like is the outlier in what's been a very positive, good run for Dave Doran. Sure. Health-wise, defensively is the key. If that defense can stay as healthy as possible, then they're going to be a top defensive team in the league, and that's going to be the difference maker in a stacked QB year for the ACC, which then gets to the other thing that has to happen. I think everybody trusts Devin Leary now, right? You trust Devin Leary. I think everybody understands what he's capable of. He's good. It's who's going to step up in the backfield? Who's going to step up at wide receiver in the absence of Ovies? Those are good problems to have if you're NC State. If that's your you got the quarterback thing figured out. It's the other guys that are the unknown, and so far everybody seems to be talking positive about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Devin Carter is someone who had like, okay, we're probably starting to get it, turn the corner here and being consistent. Sometimes he has the droopsy dropsies. I think Trent Penix is going to be good. I think the backfield is going to be the main question, but you definitely have some horses out there. But overall, I feel like it's just, can they maintain the confidence, or what like story narrative are they going to roll with? Like the underdog spiel where like nobody really believed in us? Because that's not really true. We do.
It's unfinished business. It's unfinished business. Great, that's what this is about. Great. This is they had a historic season taken away from them. Like we'll give them the win. We'll give them the win in the Holiday Bowl, right? So we'll give them the win in the Holiday Bowl, and that's the sell. Like we could have had this historic season, so we're going to make it the real historic season. Win the last Atlantic Division title, right, before they scrap divisions and go to the 3-5-5 model. Those are the goals. It makes sense. They could look a team like NC State and Carolina's in the same boat. You got to take advantage of the windows that you have.
Yeah.
They've swung and missed a couple of times because Wake Forest has been the team that goes and takes advantage of the window like they did last year, winning the Atlantic, which gets us to the Demon Deacons. And we understand what's going on with Sam Hartman. I mean, as bad as the news is, it's also good at the same time because Dave Clawson, their head coach, was adamant about how, look, it was a non-football thing. He's going to be back. He'll be back at some point this season. I do trust that Dave Clawson's offensive system, the mesh and everything else, will put some points on the board. The difference between State and Wake Forest in terms of why State's getting a lot of love and Wake Forest is respected but not taking the jump over the Wolfpack comes down to the defense. You could put 45 on the board. Yeah. But the other team can put up 47, 49. That's the big issue for Wake Forest this upcoming season. They have to get better defensively for people to take them even more seriously.
But I think at some point in college football, we're so offense driven now that we just don't really care about the defense. So if they can just do enough to just don't screw it up, I think that's where they're at. If Bothroyd can figure it out defensively, he can get that team rallied around together for that defense side of the ball. I don't think it really matters whether or not they're outstanding. They don't even have to match energy at this point. We just need you to not mess it up for the offense.
That's fair. That's fair. And then for North Carolina, it's don't mess it up defensively, right? I think the quarterback thing will take care of itself. British Brooks, he's out for the season. That's brutal. He really came on there at the end against NC State. That's tough for the senior. Hate to see that. But North Carolina season, to me, was going to be dependent on whether or not Gene Chizik, the new defensive coordinator, can simplify things like he did for Larry Fedora a few years ago. With what they've got the talent, it's the scheme that seemed to be the big problem. And they broke down defensively so many times last year. And that's been the focal point this offseason.
Well, listen, I don't know why anybody truly very transparent Carolina grad here. Why do you have expectations this year? This should be the year that you just have fun. This is just a year kind of like for basketball to where we popped up with a national championship run. Who knew? You should be we might be really battling for the Coastal. You just got to ride the tide with this team. Because you just don't know. And the British Brooks thing was brutal. But like I said, this team before that was pretty much we could get a good season. It could just be we're just here ready for basketball.
Although people could be checked out already when you get to App State, right? Because App State's could be ready for that one.
1,003%.
Truly ready for that one, right?
And they've done it before.
Yes, they have. They do have a history of that, including going to Chapel Hill. I'm not even talking about UNC, but if we're talking about specifically UNC, let's talk about them going to Chapel Hill,
right.
And raining on that parade. All right, before we wrap this up on the ACC Panic Room, who is going to be your surprise team in the ACC this year? We talked about Clemson. We understand what State's about. Wake Forest got some expectations. Who's actually going to be your surprise team this year?
It's going to be Duke football. I think they're going to surprise people. I think they're going to do better than people think. I think as much as they might lose some games, it kind of reminds me of that Wake Forest team in the first year of their newest head coach. You saw them in games, you saw them have opportunities. They just didn't have quite enough of the crew to really get that thing rolling. Didn't have enough horses in the stables. I think Duke is going to do better than people expect, but I also think Louisville is going to do much better than people expect.
That's the tricky one. I mean, I brought this up in relation to NC State. Malik Cunningham, we talk about this stacked ACC year for quarterback. Everybody understands Leary. There's questions about DJ Uyunglele and the guys coming up behind him. We know about Sam Hartman. We got the quarterback battle at UNC. Cunningham, I guess this is just kind of where Louisville is in terms of standing. He can win you a game. So that's gonna be something to look out for as well. I also think Boston College, with a fully healthy year, unlike what happened last year, might surprise some people as well. With Duke, you talk about no expectations for Carolina. For me, it's just for Duke. Me and Duke, it's just, hey, just compete. I mean, because we saw at the end under David Cutcliffe, that team just didn't have it. So you're just looking for Elko to get these guys back invested and let the rest happen. I don't expect them to make a bowl game. I don't expect them to flirt with a bowl game. But just have some good vibes.
Games, they can win the first four. Quiet as it's kept. They can start out 4-0, and then everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, Duke is here." Duke might be a conversation in the Coastal. And I don't want to hear nothing. I just want any apologies. I want to be on my apology tour.
All right, we'll bring you back. We will bring you back when that happens.
Good.
That's going to wrap it up for this edition of the ACC Panic Room. That's Candace Cooper filling in for Lauren Brownlow. She's from Locked On ACC. I'm Joe Ovies. We'll see you next week.